Welcome to Sustainable AF, otherwise known as everything you ever wanted to know about sustainability, but were too afraid to ask.
This series is going to discuss the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and every one of our episodes is going to focus on a particular goal, on the issues that matter at both a global and a country scale, the different solutions, the technologies available, the policy options, and the education needed. One thing we thought you might like to know is who we are, why we wanted to launch this podcast, and why now. I'll start with myself. My name's Felicia Jackson. I'm an entrepreneur and an author, and I've set up and run a couple of digital research businesses and published a book called Conquering Carbon. A few years ago, I realized I didn't actually know enough about how renewable energy and carbon pricing connected to policy. So I went back to study at university at SOAS. This is where I now teach global energy and climate policy and sustainable finance, not to be too specific. I'm also chief executive of Safinda, a capacity building and data research initiative focused on climate and sustainable finance data in emerging markets. I work as an advisor to companies and to governments and sit on a UNEP committee developing a methodology for one of the sub-targets of SDG 17.
And I'm Alex Godfrey. I used to be a bond trader in London, but after 10 years, I recognised that I wanted to do more with the world. So I quit my job, I jumped on a plane, and I met a dear friend and environmentalist of mine, James Johnson. He took me deep inside the Amazon rainforest and even deeper into the concept of regenerative agriculture. This trip planted a seed in my mind about working with nature rather than against it, as well as the economic benefits of doing so. So I went back to school and I gained an MSc at SOAS in global energy and climate policy, which furthered my passion for systems-based thinking, and is also where I first met Fee. Her energy and knowledge on all the subjects we will discuss meant we instantly hit it off, and I've learned so much from her in such a short space of time. I am currently setting up my own business that focuses on regenerative agriculture and its financing in the UK, as I truly believe that agriculture is where renewable energy was 10 years ago.
Now, one day, Alex and I were actually talking about how important it is for everyone to understand what's happening in our world, not just climate change, but the reasons behind it, the way in which our systems operate. The thing about talking to Alex, the thing that struck me when we met was his interest, his passion, and his ability to put events in a wider context, and most importantly, an ability to change the way you think. Whether people want to hear it or not, the world is going through a major transformational shift because of climate, because of COVID, because of growing population, increasingly scarce resources, and rapidly accelerating technology. But at the same time, we're all drowning in a sea of information, and we need to learn how to engage with it. Everyone needs to know how this is going to affect them. And the choices we make in the next few years are going to determine, for better or worse, the kind of world in which we live. Fundamentally, it's about caring enough to learn more and understanding enough to act.
I love podcasts. Full disclosure, I'm dyslexic, so I find podcasts a great learning tool. They provide so much information in a very digestible way, and I find them amazing resources over just trawling through academic journals. So I thought to myself, why not do one? Fee doesn't listen to podcasts that much, but is always looking to learn more. And we thought, why not get together, put our heads together and see what comes up?
So you're going to have to tell us what you think. Now, our goal with this series is to help you understand one of the world's greatest attempts to make the planet a better, cleaner, fairer place, the Sustainable Development Goals. What really matters is the way they work across silos and sectors, meaning they give us a consistent and concerted approach to tackling some of the world's biggest and most intractable problems. Best of all, it doesn't actually matter whether you look at the goals as a means of acting morally and doing the right thing, or as a way to optimize human capital. Whichever approach you take, if we achieve them, the end result is going to be a cleaner, fairer world where people are treated with respect.
These Sustainable Development Goals are intended to help us direct decision-making towards building a better future, or more simply put, it's a recipe for making the world a better place. There are 17 of them, and they are focused on how we can tackle these huge system problems like poverty, education, health, or climate change.
Now, there's no doubt that in 2020, the impact of the pandemic was dramatic and awful. But one of the things it also demonstrated was human potential to work together and solve massive problems when we have to. The difficulty for further change is that COVID was a problem everyone could see. It affected everybody and everyone saw the need for action. Things like climate, poverty, and sustainability are much stickier. They're much more difficult to solve. And the impact of these problems are distant in time and actually often in place. Time is a real problem for people. We're not used to thinking in the long term.
Absolutely. So that means we have to learn to rethink our approach on the world around us. Everything, when you look into it, is interconnected, and what we do in one place will have an impact somewhere else. The goals provide a framework to change the system that underpin the way in which we live. Changing the system means fundamentally changing the structures and processes that cause the system to behave in a certain way. This highlights things like structural inequalities, unequal access to resources, poverty, institutionalized racism, sexism, and huge problems like climate change, life on Earth, everything.
With every episode, we're going to take you through a goal. We're going to explore why it matters, what we need to do about it, and what that might mean for you. We're going to talk about the policies that really affect change, the technologies that are going to transform people's lives, and the changes that are coming to our economies, our incomes, and our ways of working.
We'll look at how education, health, poverty, and hunger are all interconnected, how small actions can have big impacts. The goals set out human ambition in a way that's focused on people rather than just simply expecting money or technology to solve all of our problems.
There's no doubt that actually achieving the Sustainable Development Goals is going to be an incredibly complex process. But as Alex says, in the end, it all comes down to people. We already have the technology and the processes and the skills. What we lack is a shared understanding and the will to act. And as with all the goals, communication education is the first step that underlies achieving what we want. So that's the step we're taking. So we hope that you'll join us on this journey to become Sustainable AF.
Let's kick things off and dive into the goals.
Okay, the first one is one of the most important. It's poverty. Now, you can look at this not just as something about doing the right thing, but if you think about it, it's an act of justice. Poverty is about human rights. And actually, to the UN, it's the key. Solving poverty is the key to unlocking enormous human potential. Nearly half the world's population lives in extreme poverty today, and that means they live on just around 90 pence a day. So that's just over €1 or maybe $1.25. This goal is about raising at least half of those out of poverty by 2030. And one thing that affects everyone, whether extreme poverty, being a working poor, or just getting by, is the invisibility of being poor. There is no power. The poor don't have status. Sometimes poverty is even seen as a moral failing. Nobody talks about the poor except as this amorphous mass that needs to be dealt with. But there are specifics. Poverty means less access to resources, to healthcare, to education, to the opportunities that show each of us the potential for a better life.
Number 2, hunger. You can't ask for something more reasonable than to stop hunger. Goal 2 is a global commitment to tackle undernutrition and hunger. This goal is about food security, improved nutrition, and sustainable agriculture. Whilst efforts to address hunger have been developed strongly since the 2000s, we've still got such a long way to go. Even before the pandemic, there were millions going hungry every night. The latest numbers show that there are 690 million people that go hungry every night. And we think through the pandemic, another 150 million people will be added to this. When you then consider the fact that a third of the food in the world that is produced goes straight to waste, there's a huge distortion here and it has to be addressed.
And that brings us actually to number 3, good health and well-being. This is obviously connected to both hunger and poverty. But what really matters is that we understand it means both physical and mental health. So nutrition is absolutely important. Access to food is absolutely important. But we also have to think about how people feel. Think about how hard this year's been on everyone and how clear it's made how unequal the access is to medicines and to support, both at an individual and a country level. Good health and well-being affect everyone, old and young. There's no doubt that the way we treat our bodies and minds has long-lasting effects. That feeds into work-life balance and ultimately in the economy. We really think that this is the sort of goal that you want to know more about, that it's so clear how it affects you. So one of the things we want to do is make sure that you can ask us what you think matters most and who you'd like to hear from. So let us know your thoughts.
That brings us smartly on to number 4, and this is a huge one: quality education. This is related to health, poverty, and hunger. It's one of the most powerful tools we have to change our futures and benefit from the development of human potential. If people have the opportunity to receive a quality education, they can break out of the poverty trap. Research has shown us that for every additional year of education, it reduces the level of inequality massively. There are studies that show the link between education and innovation, high levels of productivity and an increase in economic growth. Pulling people out of poverty, giving them education, makes the world a better place for everyone. Access to education underpins 2 fundamental aspects in society. It opens up opportunities, and it also teaches people to think for themselves in a time of such a torrent of fake news. To be able to uncover facts, listen to disinformation, and reject conspiracy theories will make the flow of information and people's ability to look at the world and manage it much better. What education, quality education, also gives us is the ability to address gender inequalities, providing women and girls with equal access to education, healthcare, decent work, and to be able to participate in the political and economic process only means that we will have a more sustainable economy and a more beneficial society.
Now that's actually the next goal. Number 5 is gender equality. This is so important to deal with. Not just, the reason Alex talks about are really important, this idea that women have to be enabled to play a full role within society and the economy. But the reality is women are still being told what they should and shouldn't do, that they belong at home, that they should be politer, they should be nicer. The thing is, women do bear the majority of responsibility for childcare, and we're not actually undercutting that in any way. Women's work as mothers and carers is vital, it's critical. But women can also make amazing contributions to the economy and the wider world. For those who can't have children, just not having a child doesn't make you any less of a woman. It just means you've chosen a different path in life. Women have contributed throughout history. But one of the things we have to remember about history is that history is written by the victors. We know the figures in history because of the way we were told about them. Our lives are short enough that we know ourselves through story, and we have to actually understand what is the story we're telling. And one of the things that's really important about this is just to think about how history is interconnected. Things that we think of as so far in the past are actually really recent. Most of us know the name of Rosa Parks. She actually kicked off the civil rights movement. I don't know how many of you know that she actually died in 2005. I think of Rosa Parks and the civil rights movement as something that happened long before I was born, that it's in history, it's something we built on. But did you know that given she died in 2005, she could also have watched Shrek? Doesn't that give you an idea of how concertina the whole thing is? And we have to start to look at our history in a different way if we're ever going to be able to view our future in a different way.
Number 6, clean water and sanitation. Now, if COVID hasn't shown the importance of this year, I don't know what will. But having clean water and sanitation means being able to avoid exposure to countless diseases, not just COVID. Due to bad economics, poor infrastructure, millions of people around the world, including children, die every year from disease associated with inadequate water supply, sanitation, and hygiene. As I said, when the best protection from COVID is washing your hands, access to clean water is critical. In our Western world, we can wash our hands or we have bottles of sanitizer. There's a lot of the world that doesn't have this, and we need to think about that. Something that's also very close to my heart is the food chain, where our food comes from. If there's polluted water at the beginning of that food chain, that pollution goes on to crops and into livestock. That comes through to us as end consumers. Why else does clean water matter? Because without the water cycle, poverty continues. Because without it, billions of hours are wasted walking to streams and tributaries. Without clean water, economies are stunted and families are crippled. Without clean water, you can't stay healthy. If you can't stay healthy, you can't go to work or school. You can't build a home, you can't grow food, and you can't provide for your family. It's huge.
Now that brings us to the next one, which is number 7, and that is affordable and clean energy. This really closely connects to this idea of people being able to do things for themselves. It's a topic close to both Alex and my heart, as this sector, the energy sector, has seen the most dramatic systemic change in the last few years. Due to regulations and financial support, renewable energy technologies have fallen in price so far that actually solar PV is now the cheapest and cleanest form of energy generation anywhere. Not only does that transform the economics of the global energy market, but it actually means that the ability to have clean energy in your home is being brought to people. It gives people the energy to cook their food and light their homes to study and work. It actually provides the opportunity to light clinics at night. It helps to create thousands of jobs as the world tries to sort of recover from what's been going on through COVID. If you think about it, what it's going to do is bring us energy democracy. It's going to change the dynamic of wars over oil. And of course, most importantly, in the big picture in terms of climate change, clean energy doesn't contribute to negative GHG emissions.
Absolutely. This one is so excitable. And part of that, beyond us being scholars of this, is it's actually happening in our lifetime. It's happening in front of our eyes, which is epic to see. And it's laying a roadmap for so many other industries, products, ways of thinking and systems to transition as well. So it's really exciting. And this then leads us on to number 8, decent work and economic growth. Now, looking at this goal, we think economic growth is separate from decent work because, frankly, you don't need decent work to grow an economy unless the individual matters. Fairness demands that we ensure people, particularly those on lower incomes, have routes to progress in work and access to benefits. Work for most people is about security. If you take an example of the gig economy, Uber, Lyft, Deliveroo, Just Eat, yeah, they're providing low-paid jobs, but zero security on 0-hour contracts. It's not a positive shift for employment. If we take a look at the global supply chain and how it broke down during COVID, it was absolutely terrible. The just-in-time business model that has dominated the globalized world just stopped working. We have to build resilience into industry, business, supply chains and create a more decent and fair way of working and operating. That's what needs to be at the heart of this, we think. A fair day's work for a fair day's pay is what my granddad used to say to me, and I still think that rings true today. To create a sustainable economy, we need people to have decent work, a sense of security, and to trust that they have access to healthcare, education, and more.
And that brings us to number 9, innovation, industry, and infrastructure. Now, as you can imagine, these 3 are rather big issues. And actually, Alex and I don't think we can cover all 3 of them in just one session. So we're probably going to break it into 3 different episodes. One of the things that matters, though, is understanding that innovation, industry, and infrastructure are fundamental to the creation of a sustainable economy. They're what drives the world forward. They're what drives and creates new jobs, new industries, and new markets. We have to try and create a robust foundation through the processes where successful communities can thrive. Doesn't matter whether that's urban or rural or wherever it might be. Over the last few years, it's got a bit better, but traditionally, industry, innovation, and infrastructure haven't really had sustainability at the top of their agendas. So that means we're facing a difficult time to try and build resilience and sustainability in industry. But the way we do that is through innovation and better infrastructure.
Number 10, inequalities. Inequalities is about an imbalance of power. I'm not saying that everyone is the same, but what I'm saying is everyone should have an equal access to opportunity. Research has shown us that inequality of outcomes, how much you earn, how you live, is inextricably linked to the inequality of opportunity. Inequality didn't used to be considered as an important metric or issue because all we wanted to see was an overall increase in income. But as the inequality gap has widened, we see how much more the poor are suffering and the rich are getting richer. And we'll discuss like tokenism and how that makes women or people of colour feel even when they do get the job. It's a super complex issue to tackle, but it's so important in this day and age to talk about it and pave the way forward that's correct.
Now, the next one that we're going to look at is number 11, sustainable cities and communities. And that's connected to issues about inequality as well. It's connected to issues about work, about innovation, about industry, about infrastructure. What 2020 has shown us is the importance of community. And at the same time, sort of what jobs are important to sustain that community and maybe keep a city running. It's actually a really exciting space to explore, technologically speaking. There's high-tech transport options like the Hyperloop, electric cars. You have to be able to get to where you're working if you're going to actually make that community work. We've also got great nature-based solutions like city farming and insect protein and lab-grown meat. The thing that connects all of this is that you can look at cities as hubs of economic drive, as innovation, but they can also be really dangerous, unclean, hard places to live. So what we're going to do in this episode is actually look at what it means to create a happy and sustainable city with a sense of community.
This leads us on to number 12, responsible production and consumption. I didn't quite realize how big this episode until I researched it. Consumption matters because it drives our entire economic system. It has built-in obsolescence in it and the need for things to be new and exciting. That's the way consumption is structured by modern day industry. Consumer spending, therefore, accounts for 60% of total GDP globally. It's an insane figure. And the way it's structured just isn't right. It's not sustainable. Most of the ways in which our products and services are designed is built on the exploration of resources, a funnel of materials to waste with a short pause for use. The circular economy is one way we can apply to get out of that, and I can't wait to talk about that more. We need to focus on how to make the most out of what we've got and make sure we live a balanced life, not just extract and dump. It's not just about what consumers are doing, though. It's all about companies as well, how they can save money by cutting down their use of fossil fuels, water, and other resources. If you look at the Accenture analysis that suggests the circular economy, that means not just extracting and dumping, it's keeping things in the loop, reusing materials from what we extract. It could be worth as much as $4 trillion. And you think after 2020 and the economic fallout we're about to have from that, $4 trillion being pumped back into the system could be a great thing. As we mentioned earlier, we've seen the impact of the energy transition and what that's done in the last decade or so. We're looking to start a transformation of the way we extract resources, create them, package them, and keep value in the supply chain.
And that actually brings us to number 13, which is climate. This is the really, really big one. Well, they're all the really, really big one. I spend my entire time thinking, no, this is the most important one. No, this is. No, this is. They all are. But the thing that matters with climate is not just because it's affected by every choice we make in each of the others, but also the risk that comes with climate change is going to have an impact on every single system within which we work. It's been the elephant in the room for years of many a boardroom meeting, a political assembly, and actually sometimes even in the purchase decisions we make when we buy things in the supermarket. If we don't take climate action seriously and address it in a systemic way as soon as possible, this world is going to be a miserable place to live in for us and our children and our children's children. So when we look at this, we are going to look at so many different of the other goals and how they come together. And actually, this is one of those ones when I'm really looking forward to how we're going to unpick what it means and what we need to do.
That feeds on nicely to goal number 14, life below water. Apart from its fundamental role in which the water cycle works, without which we wouldn't have rain, drinking water, sanitation, food crops, and so on. It's also the biggest thing on Earth. It covers 99% of the living space on Earth, and it drives all of our systems to make it habitable. So, of course, we have to have a pod on this and understand its nuances. Oceans are also incredible carbon sinks. They absorb 30% of the carbon dioxide that we put into the atmosphere. Because of this, the oceans are getting more acidic. Because of this, the ice caps are melting, raising the sea level, and it's making it harder for the ocean to act as this wonderful carbon sink. And it's also having a devastating effect on sea life. A clean and healthy ocean also matters because it's part of our food chain. If you lose part of that food chain, the system breaks down. Krill are one of the smallest things in the ocean, but they feed one of the biggest. Their food chain is completely interlinked. And if it breaks down, the whole system can break down. If you think of it like life on land with bees pollinating, you can't afford to lose those workers.
And number 15 is actually about life on land. Now, obviously, most of us know about this through the work of our favourite environmentalist and man in whom we trust, Sir David Attenborough. This is the man who's changed the minds of people around the world. He's been banging the drum about the dangers of rising population and human destruction of the planet for as long as I can remember. The thing is, we're actually going through something scientists have called the sixth mass extinction. I don't know whether you know this, but we as human beings have actually wiped out 60% of existing biodiversity. Now, we know species can recover, but not if they're extinct. We can also see how COVID-19 is one of the consequences of the way in which our interaction with nature has caused a problem. There are these megatrends of population growth and demographic change and globalization, as well as climate change. But what they do is their effect is to change the environment and the way in which we interact with it. It's actually people's encroachment on wild areas that is a key factor in diseases spreading from animals to people, which is exactly what happened with COVID. Our growing understanding of the impacts of climate change has actually grown alongside the importance, the acknowledgement of the necessity of sustainable development. We have to find new ways to do things. You have to operate in a sustainable way as a business, because if you don't, your operations and possibly even your customers aren't going to be there in 30 years. All of this means we need to rethink the way in which we plan our strategies. And actually, whether we're talking as a government or a company or as people, we've got to understand that the way we've done things historically is no longer a reliable guide to how we need to do things in the future.
We're on the home stretch now, people. The last two, should I say, are about the framework around the framework. Number 16 is peace, justice, and strong institutions. This matters because no system change can be effective in regions of conflict. Without peace, none of these goals are possible. With weak institutions and poor legal frameworks, corruption is often rife. It leads to a lack of regulation, and with little enforcement, the systems just don't work. So we're never going to be able to achieve sustainable development if we don't get these on lockdown first. Justice lies at the heart of every decision that we make. If we are to reduce inequalities and manage the world in a world that one we want to live, we have to get these things right.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last one of the goals, number 17, is about partnerships. And in the end, it links to questions of justice and peace because it's about trust. What brings the whole framework together is transparency. It's about relationships and global cooperation that actually helps to move us forward. Climate change is actually highlighting a global issue that we as a globe are trying to address. But the impact on the energy system of the regulations that we impose, it's shown what we can achieve when we work together. But what needs to happen is the sharing of knowledge, the sharing of expertise, and the shared experience in new approaches to work and life. We need to build financial bridges and trust bridges between developed and developing economies. We have to ensure that new systems and institutions are designed and deployed to support sustainability.
And that's it, guys. That's the 17 goals. So I guess why now? Why do they matter? And what are we trying to achieve?
What it boils down to really for me is that we're living in times of unprecedented change.
There's that word.
Some of us have already lived through the impacts of rapid technological change with the development of the internet and the introduction of the mobile phone. They've changed the ways in which we live, work, and play. Yet COVID-19 has shown the impact of sudden shocks on our way of life, impact on politics, economics, working habits, everything. And these kind of shocks are going to continue to affect the way in which our actions evolve. So in the end, we need to change the way we do things. But we do accept that that's going to look different for everyone. One of you might decide to eat locally. Someone else might decide to give up a car. Some people might decide to only take one long-distance flight a year. You might decide to invest in climate-friendly funds or ESG. or maybe lobby your bank to develop green financial products. You might actually decide to work within your business to make it more sustainable. Maybe you're going to increase recycling rates or see if you can introduce a circular business model. For someone else, it might mean joining the climate strikes, refusing to pay taxes set aside for nuclear weapons, or actually joining someone like Extinction Rebellion to take direct action.
The point is really to make choices and make those choices your own. No one is saying that everyone must agree or even do the same thing or even make a good choice, but know that the choice that you make has consequences of your actions. Live your life consciously. Don't just go along with what someone tells you to do. Think for yourself. Your decision may cost you, but own it. Sometimes we don't feel like we have choice, but we always do. And we have the opportunity to take back our power, share it, own it, be part of the decision-making process, and basically make the world a better place.
And we hope we're going to take you on that journey to do that. So we hope that you'll stay with us as we try to become Sustainable AF.
Yeah.